Hello and welcome to part 2 of my series of machine knitting for beginners. And what I'm going to do is very briefly go through how you set up a machine. There should be instructions with your machine, but even so, sometimes they're written in very weird English. So let me go through the things that are the same for all machines. Whether or not it's in a massive case, this one isn't, it's a very small, light one. Your machine will have a set of brackets on the bottom and two clamps in the box, and the clamps will need to be used to clamp it to the table. You can see here they just do up, they slide into the brackets and they do up. It's very important that your table doesn't have a bevel on the top edge or a bevel on the bottom edge, otherwise the clamps won't go on properly. And it's really important that your machine stays nice and solid and doesn't move. The next thing that you're going to do is put on the yarn tension mast. Okay, this is a great big pole or stick that sticks out of either the middle of the machine and there's a little bracket on the back, or sometimes it fits actually in the carriage and moves with the carriage. More modern machines, it just goes in the back, and it's a great big long pole. Sometimes they're short. There's a little yarn guide there. It goes up here. Okay, you'll get, and all of them have these little tension discs which hold the yarn in place. I'll show you how that works in a minute. These great big aerials which are going to bend over and tension the yarn, and then it all comes down here, and then the yarn goes down to the carriage. Which leads me to the next bit, the carriage. Sometimes they're permanently fitted on and there's a little bracket that holds them in place. Sometimes they just slide right off and you have to put them in yourself. Either which way, you definitely need a carriage in order to do any knitting, and normally they are held on at the back but lift up at the front. Okay, and then finally, the last most important part for doing any knitting at all is the needle presser. This goes on the front. Okay, I won't put it on for the minute because I'm going to show you how the thing works in a minute. But this holds the yarn in place. The yarn goes through there, and I'll show you how that sets up in a minute. Now the next thing is how the knitting machine actually works. So if I pull forward a needle, you'll be able to see that every needle has got a little latch on it that opens and closes. Okay, and the needles can move backwards and forwards. So what I've got here is I've got a little bit of knitting set up. Okay, and what each of this is what happens is when you've got a loop, one of the needles moves forward like so, and you can see as it goes forward, the loop currently on it goes behind the latch. Then the yarn goes into the hook of the needle, and the needle moves back again, and you can see it pulls the loop back and forms another stitch. It moves on to the next one, does it again, puts the loop behind it, pulls it back and forms a stitch. And as you go along a line, each one of these needles, it's a bit like one of those rug hook things, goes and forms another loop. Okay, and that is how a row of knitting is formed. Now I'm doing it by hand. Of course, you don't do it by hand in real life, you do it with a machine. So the next thing I'm going to show you is how you set up the needles and how they work. Right, next thing is, if you have a look at your needles, you should find you've got 4 positions that they can be in. On most machines they're called A, B, C and randomly E. On this one they're called A, B, C and D, but 4 positions. Sometimes they're called 1, 2, 3 and 4, and sometimes they're called non-working position, working position, forward working position and holding position. However, it's always 4. Now, with the needles right back in position A, non-working position, nothing at all happens. Okay, doesn't move any needles at all. With a needle brought forward into position B, like so, you will see as I slide the carriage backwards and forwards, it pulls the needle backwards and forwards and causes it to move forward, where it will grab the yarn and make a loop. Position C we're not going to go into now, but that is essentially the position for patterning. If I put a couple of needles in position B, you can see they do their thing, and then if I put it into patterning mode, you will see it didn't do a lot. Okay, so when I go left, they don't do a lot, and when I'm going right, I'm in non-patterning mode and then knit normally. Okay, so if I were to put a couple more needles into position C, you would see that the 2 needles of the forward knit and the 2 needles of the backward don't. Look, there they are knitting, and then the 2 needles at the backward don't do a great deal. Okay, and then finally, if you're in position D, normally they will just knit back into normal position, like that. They go back into normal position, but actually sometimes you can set the carriage up just to leave them alone, so you can have stitches on them that leave them alone. Oh, whoops, that was the wrong position. Hold on. Let's leave them in position D. Let's try that. There you go. So you can just have stitches on there and they're left alone, and then you can actually set the carriage back up so that it knits them back to position C. Sorry, knits them back to position B. There you go, and then on we go. Right, so that's broadly how the carriage works. Now let me just set something up and then I'll show you again. Right, now what I've done is I've pulled forward some needles into position B, which is normal working position. Now it's really difficult to see here, but if you have a look, you can see engraved on the bed 40, 30, 20 there, there's a 10 there, a 0, and then 10, 20, 30, 40. So the 0 is the exact centre of the bed. And what I've done is I pulled 20 needles either side of 0, so I've got a total of 40 needles. Now this is what I would use to do a tension swatch with, and as I move the carriage you'll be able to see they sort of form a pattern. Okay, and that's what's going to knit a row at a time. And that is the basic situation of how a knitting machine works. One final thing I will say just before I finish this video, here you've got a dial. If I put it to 0, it pulls the needles back a very small amount, which will make very small loops and therefore make very tight knitting. If I put it up to 9, or even further on this one, okay, then it will pull it back an enormous amount, and that will create great big loops and have very, very loose knitting. So this is your tension dial. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to cast on and how to do just completely straight knitting. And I've got a rough and ready cast on and a more complicated cast on to show you. Okay, I'll see you next time. Goodbye.